Well, we are at 3:05, and we will get going and allow others to join us as they do. I appreciate Amber for opening up and getting the screen up for us. I'm Dr. Stephen Holt, and I'm the strategic consultant for the Executive Steering Committee, lead facilitator of this particular committee of the Tri-Excellence team. But I'm going to have Erica of Tri-Excellence get us rolling. Erica.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Executive Steering Committee meeting for the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. We are glad to have you in this virtual space with us today. Could you advance the slides for me, Amber? This morning, we are going to have Amber Ontiveros and her team providing support to us. So if you have any troubles with your entry panelist and participating in the meeting, they are available to assist you. Amber, if you would share briefly as we do our Zoom protocols for participation in the meeting today.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Just to remind everyone, we will keep everyone muted unless you're speaking. You can mute and unmute, and I will show you how to do that here in a few minutes. We ask that you raise your hand when you wish to speak. I'm frozen. Sorry.
No problem. Sometimes technology needs a little help. There you go.
So as you can see in the left-hand side, there are features in Zoom that allow you to unmute and mute yourself. And you can, of course, click this button right here to share your video. And this allows you to see all the participants as well as to raise your hand during the meeting. Just a friendly reminder to all of the ESC members that this meeting will be recorded. There will be opportunity for public comment here shortly. If you have, for the public, if you have a public comment that you wish to raise around the topic for this evening, please email it at the email address listed in the slide, which is info@i5rosequarter.org. If you have technical issues, text Corinne at 504-905-2892. And if you wish to make a public comment, there is a phone number that you can call at 971-247-1195. The webinar ID is 895-0222-9234. There is a passcode 254613, and you would essentially press *9, and then you will unmute yourself. If you are, this information is provided on the website. If we advance the slide and you don't have access to this, so you can then see it on the website.
Amber, I'm sorry, but you transposed numbers in the webinar ID.
I did.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
8.
I'm dyslexic, so thank you. 859-0222-9234. Apologies for that.
Thank you for sharing, Amber. We appreciate that. Quickly, I am not seeing everyone yet, but if you would just acknowledge by saying that you are present. I believe President Lynn Peterson is with us today.
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Glad to have you. Brendan Fenn with the Urban Mobility Office.
Good afternoon, Erica. Present.
Awesome. I believe I saw Nate McCoy with NAMAC.
Yes, we are here, Erica, present.
Wonderful. Are there other executive steering committee members that have entered that I do not see yet?
Vice Chair Simpson.
Yes, Vice Chair, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Erica.
Indeed. Dr. Holt, if you would quickly share with us the principles of agreement as we move further into the meeting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Erica. Next slide. Our values for this particular committee and for the work on the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project and all parties that have participated are identified, as you see, restorative justice being number one, community input and transparent decision-making, mobility-focused, climate action and improvement for public health. I won't expand around those at this moment, but all of the work will be filtered through this lens. Next slide, please. Our principles for how we do what we do today is, as you see, that your voice matters. We ask you to speak your truth, to listen for understanding, to deal with issues and not people, which means we may experience some discomfort. And while we do so, that you'll stay respectfully engaged, and we accept and expect non-closure. We won't wrap everything up today, but we will continue to move forward together as a team. Next slide. Right before our public comment, let me give an opportunity for our Vice Chair to have any opening remarks. Vice Chair Simpson.
Thank you, Dr. Holt, and I appreciate the point of reference there in terms of what we are brought here to do and work towards. Obviously, success comes in all different forms, and everybody has their definition of it. So it's very broad, but I think the complex piece here is that we all try to blend together everybody's different perceptions of what success is based on their different values, their life experiences, and try to blend that into one big successful concept and really ideology around how this project can address everybody's needs. And so I just want to reiterate very simply that this particular project is not going to be able to solve all racial and social challenges we experience today. This project is not going to solve climate change. And most importantly, I would say based on today's biggest concerns we're dealing with is this project is not going to address our current economic recession. However, I do believe that what we have today and the minds that we have around the table will enable us to be able to showcase how you actually can bring community stakeholders together to achieve shared values and shared outcomes, which will hopefully be a conduit to achieving that triple bottom line of success from the environmental, from the social, and from the economic standpoint. And so I would just urge, as you had mentioned earlier, Dr. Holt, for everybody to be respectful of everyone's opinions, make sure that people keep in the back of their minds that we do have lanes that we need to function within here, and we're not going to be successful at every single thing to the extent that everybody aspires for us to be successful at. But I do believe that if we do work together in terms of making sure that this project is successful, then I think all of those different elements that everybody is excited and engaged with and has passion about can actually be displayed on this as a finished product. And so I'm excited to get going in the new year, and hopefully we can keep the ball rolling down the lane, and we can have a strike at the end. So Back to you, sir.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I appreciate that very much. Well stated. Let's go to our public comment. And Amber, back into your hands.
Natalie is going to, it looks like we have 4 people that potentially want to provide public comment. Natalie's going to pull up the timer. So each person has a minute to provide their public comment. We'll identify the people in the order for which they've requested public comment.
Great, thanks for that, Amber. So hopefully everyone can see the 1-minute timer on my screen. I'm going to go ahead and invite those with raised hands to provide their comment. Comments will be limited to 1 minute in duration for this meeting. If you'd like to make a more extensive comment, there are options for how you may do so on your agenda. So I'll go ahead and go down the list. First, we have Aaron Brown. Aaron, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself and provide your comment, please.
Thank you. Is it possible for Joe Courtwright to go first? Our testimonies are kind of linked.
Oh, certainly. Okay, Joseph Courtwright, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Joe Courtwright. I'm an economist here in Portland. I noted that one of your values is transparent decision-making. And I want to say that ODOT is not being transparent about this project in a fundamental way. What they're proposing to build is at least an 8-lane freeway at the Rose Quarter. And despite their verbal contortions about just adding 2 auxiliary lanes, they're building what, from their crude diagrams that are in the environmental assessment, at least 126-foot right-of-way. And they have not, which is plenty wide enough for an 8-lane freeway with wide shoulders. They haven't analyzed the traffic or environmental impacts of that. And Metro, City of Portland, and others asked for a full environmental impact statement, which they are not doing. And I should also say, and I testified to OTC last week, Oregon Department of Transportation has not divulged the actual width of the right-of-way, despite being directed to do so by the Transportation Commission. And they have essentially treated it as a state secret. And just to conclude, the very wide right-of-way that they're proposing there not only increases the environmental impacts, but makes it that much harder to economically do any kind of buildable covers. And you should have transparency about that.
Thank you so much for your comment. We need to move on to the next one. So I'll go ahead and invite Aaron Brown to make your comment. And I believe you should be, I think you are unmuted.
Fantastic. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, members of the ESC. My name is Aaron Brown. I'm here to echo the concerns expressed by my colleague, Joe Courtwright, who just spoke. Joe's been asking ODOT for 6 weeks to affirm a simple basic detail of this project. How many feet wide is the proposed freeway? This tiny detail should only take 15 minutes to confirm. But ODOT's continued to avoid publicly disclosing this fact. Why? Well, ODOT's diagram suggests that the freeway they are planning to build is wide enough for a full 8 lanes. This additional right-of-way has enormous consequences for the air pollution at Harriet Tubman Middle School, future carbon emissions, and future traffic. ODOT certainly hasn't studied the impacts of an 8-lane freeway, but that's apparently what they are building to the detriment of our lungs, our streets, our community, and our planet's future. Furthermore, and most pertinent to all of you on the ESC, the wider that ODOT makes the freeway, the more difficult and more expensive it is to construct buildable caps that meet the goals of neighborhood and racial justice advocates pushing for restorative justice, like the Albina Vision Trust. If you get sick of getting runaround questions from ODOT on these and other details, I'll remind you that it's not too late to join us in pushing for an environmental impact statement that will force this agency to be accountable and transparent to the public about their intentions to the community. In short, I know my final comment, I implore you to use this time and future ESC meetings to ask ODOT for further clarity about the trade-offs of every foot of ODOT's right-of-way as it relates to the right for clean air, safe streets, and a livable future.
Aaron. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And just for future reference, for those who may be participating, we appreciate your comments. And I know that a minute goes by real quickly, and I appreciate the fact that you take time to script it in light of being responsible to the entire community. Going forward, you can anticipate if we're going over, then you'll be muted. It's not personal. It's just in relationship to keeping things moving. So, and if your further comments, we want to hear them. It's necessary to capture it. There are some ways to do so. So thank you. Back to you, Natalie.
Thank you for that, Dr. Holt. I'll go ahead and move on to the next person with their hand raised. And I apologize, I don't know the correct pronunciation. It's either Ada or Ada Crandall. And I'll go ahead and allow you to talk now and invite you to make your comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Ada Crandall. I am 14 years old and I represent Sunrise PDX. Since I only have 1 minute here, I'll cut to the chase. Expanding a freeway in the middle of a climate crisis is completely absurd. Already, 40% of our state's carbon emissions come from transportation, and to spend $800 million adding more lanes to a freeway is only going to worsen the situation. You'd be paying $800 million for more pollution, more environmental damage, and no real solution to congestion. $800 million for a huge step in the wrong direction. We are in the middle of a climate crisis, and instead of investing in sustainable long-term solutions, you are choosing to build more freeways. In the middle of a climate crisis, you are continuing to value profit over people. How can you live with that on your conscience? My generation has been handed a massive crisis to clean up. So why would you make it worse? We will never stop fighting, but at the end of the day, our futures lie in the hands of our leaders, and we are counting on you to have the courage to do what is right. You have the opportunity to decide which side of history you want to be on. So I ask you, will you stand with us, the youth, as we fight for our futures, or will you be the obstacle that we must overcome?
I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for that comment. And we have another one. Looks like we have a comment from Aurelia Marine. I will go ahead and invite you to make your comment now.
This freeway extension is wrong. It will expand I-5 even closer to Harriet Tubman Middle School, a school that already has around the worst air quality in the state. It will not reduce traffic congestion due to a phenomenon called induced demand. As we all saw last fall, we are currently in the middle of a climate crisis caused by carbon emissions. Building bigger freeways to make room for more cars is not the solution. You are correct in saying that this project will not stop climate change. It will make it worse. The I-5 freeway expansion must be stopped for all our sakes.
Thank you for that comment. Okay, and then Dr. Holt, I will defer to you. We have, it looks like a repeat comment, commenter. But would you allow a second comment from Aaron Brown?
Aaron, at this point, it would be kind of going, against the purpose to recreate it. It would be, I think, a little outside of the approach, but I will defer to our vice chair for his feedback on that.
I'm sorry, can you, I got a static. Can you restate that, Dr. Holt?
Yeah, it's someone has already given a comment, would like to comment again. And my response was it kind of circumvents the purpose if we're trying to keep everyone to a minute and then someone comes back in and comments for another minute. But I would defer to you to make that determination.
And this is Mr. Brown, you had indicated?
Natalie,
That's correct. It looks like he's lowered his hand at this point. So maybe that was reconsidered.
I mean, would he be the final testifier, or do we have others in line?
Mr. Vice Chair, apologies for interrupting, but I believe the hand went down, so I don't think it's an issue anymore. Thank you for looking into that.
Appreciate that. With that, there are no other hands raised at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you, Natalie, for handling it. And I want to express appreciation for all of you and each of you who come into this space and have thoughtfully prepared to engage. Again, transparent and decision-making and having information from the public so the executive steering committee can hear your voices is extremely essential. And I'll say one more time, I know that 1 minute can be a challenge. We just ask you, in light of the fact that there is a community of individuals engaged in conversation, you do your best to stay within that time frame. Thank you so much, and we will continue Next, I believe, is the director's update. And I will give it to Director Chandler.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. And perhaps before I get going, I just noticed on the screen that we've had another Executive Steering Committee member join us. Would you like me to keep going or pause for a moment with that introduction?
Let's make sure we've acknowledged them. And I'm trying to see, my screen isn't showing all the names. Megan, if you just call them out.
Yeah, no problem. So Steve Witter from TriNet has joined us.
Good afternoon. I apologize for being tardy.
No worries. All right. Amber, if you could go to the next slide, please. Today I wanted to just focus on two key things. The first is an update on the first Historic Albina Advisory Board meeting that we held on January 12th. And this was facilitated by Erica Warren. And the first meeting really focused on really standing up the board. So the board's purpose, their role, their charge, and including a discussion on what the board will be seeing as the project design evolves and what they'll have influence over. So here you can see an image of several of our Historic Albina Advisory Board members. After an initial project overview and including the project governance structure, we clarified that the board will be providing its recommendations to you on the project design and process as the Executive Steering Committee here, who will be taking that into considerations as you make your recommendations. And there will be future conversations around formalizing the board's liaison and reporting to you as the ESC, as well as their work and relationship with the Community Oversight Advisory Committee and the work around the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise and Workforce Program. So at the meeting, the board had an opportunity to provide feedback and a discussion really of what the board's participation means and the project's engagement with the Historic Albina Advisory Community. And I think, 4 key areas of feedback really stood out, questions around and comments around, engagement opportunities and challenges. How do I get youth involved in the processes of, looking internally at our project team demographics and the communities that we represent, talking about what authentic engagement with the Black community looks like, what the needs of the Albina community has and the values related to the highway covers and what it means to restore historic Albina. And then looking forward to continuing to work with this amazing group of individuals and the important work that they'll be doing with their next meeting starting on Tuesday next week, which is February 2nd. And then they'll be convening every 3 weeks from here on out. So thank you again to Erica for the wonderful facilitation of that first meeting. Second slide here, as part of my update today, and really as we kick off into 2021, I wanted to just take a moment and reflect on the key milestones that have been achieved over the past year, really to frame up how we move forward in this new year. I think, back one, there we go. So these milestones and this timeline shown on the screen here reflects the key actions that the team has taken in direct response to the direction that we received from the Oregon Transportation Commission. This direction, again, was provided to us as the team in direct response to a lot of the feedback and input from project partners and stakeholders over the past year. And this is really focused around communication and coordination, project governance, project values, and technical analyses. So kicking off January 2020, when the direction was provided by the commission to us as a team, to meet our first deliverable as required by House Bill 2017, we did complete and submit the cost to complete report to the legislature. With this, the commission also directed us to stand up a project governance structure. So this is exactly why you are here as our executive steering committee. That included standing up the executive steering committee, as well as a community advisory committee. And so this structure was established in early 2020 with your first meeting as the steering committee in May of 2020. We also responded to the request to develop project values, including equity principles, with your adoption of the project values in October. Around that same time, also transitioned from the Community Advisory Committee intentionally to the Historic Albina Advisory Board to make sure that we were elevating voices of the Black community, ensuring that the project outcomes reflect community interests and that Historic Albina benefits from the investments of this project. And per the Commission's direction, we also conducted and completed an environmental peer review report. This was focused on the project's air quality, noise, and greenhouse gas technical analyses. So this was in spring of 2020. We convened a panel of national experts led by a neutral facilitator to review our work. And that expert panel did support the ODOT's findings and analyses and provided recommendations to incorporate into the future design and construction phases. And so these are items that we're actively exploring now and look forward to bringing to the steering committee as they move through our process and working with the community. And this peer review also supported our steps to complete the environmental assessment. So as a follow-up to that, in November of 2020, with the Federal Highway Administration, we published the final environmental document, which is the finding of no significant impact and the revised environmental assessment. And so this final environmental document includes the technical analysis and findings, as well as responses to all of the public comments that we received during the 2019 public comment period, as well as revisions and modifications to the document and design based on that community feedback. And so in completing this environmental phase, we're now proceeding into the designing and building the project. As I've mentioned to this group previously, we also reached the exciting milestone of executing the contract with our construction management general contractor, Hamilton Sunt Joint Venture, in association with Raymore. So in addition to joining our team early to optimize design, focus on project cost and schedule, with the CMGC, we can provide near-term economic opportunities for small minority-owned businesses through the construction contracts. And as Vice Chair Simpson noted, our goal is to set up these opportunities in partnership and in ways that help support and build a pipeline for longer-term wealth generation, again, that can be achieved in partnership with other agencies and organizations. And so last but not least, the work of the Independent Highway Cover Assessment Team also kicked off in 2020 over the summer, and it continues. As you as the Executive Steering Committee will continue to direct the independent consultant team and hear more from them today. And so, as you know, the project partners continue to collaborate with this independent consultant team as part of the Highway Cover Coordination Committee. And at these meetings, recently, there's been a couple requests for clarification on the consultant team's scope of work and some questions around funding. And so as the Executive Steering Committee is directing the work of that consultant team moving forward, I just wanted to make sure that we were bringing up these two topics to inform your work. So Brendan's going to provide some additional context on that. And then when Brendan is done, I'll turn it over to April for an overview of community engagement.
Great. Thank you, Megan, colleagues. Thanks for giving me a couple minutes here to provide just a little bit of context from a previous role that I had to this role when I was working as the Governor's Transportation Policy Advisor and really help facilitate the work that we're doing here and the Governor's direction around the independent cover assessment, as well as the creation of the ESC. So I just wanted to take a moment and provide a little context on that. This project is such an opportunity. It was born from House Bill 2017, which was also created after a long tour with some legislators and the governor going around the state to say, what are some of the biggest transportation challenges in our state? And that led to the historic package being passed by the legislature and signed into law by Governor Brown. So since that time, and what the creation of this project was around creating a purpose and need, which is a bit of a term of art around the NEPA process, around what kind of problem are we trying to solve here with this. And in that, we talked a lot about the long-standing safety issues in the corridor. Obviously talked a little bit about the high crash rate that's there, that it's the 19th worst freight bottleneck in the country. Those were a lot of the pieces that went into the part of the main line improvements. So the auxiliary lanes and the shoulders. What's happened since then, and that's just a key part of what created what the legislature passed, and that stopped there. And there's another opportunity, an opportunity to create community, and that was through covers. And that's when working with our local partners at the time, I helped facilitate some conversations between the governor and our local elected officials and local partners on how we could take this to the next level and how we could try to do something really impactful to the community that was historically impacted by the construction of I-5. And so that's why this independent cover assessment was created. I appreciate being a part of its creation and now being a part of its implementation. I want you to know that where this kind of came from, the impetus and how it relates to the original project that was created House Bill 2017, and where we're pivoting from here and doing this independent work. And I'm super excited about it. I want to thank our colleague on the committee here, Bryson Davis, for participating in the HC3 meetings. I hear it's been great work. I look forward to seeing what the amazing team that's been put together by Nolan and the whole team here. It's been really historic work that's happening here. But I wanted to provide that little bit of context for those that did not take part in those conversations in the beginning about the original purpose and need of this project and how we're taking it to the next level. And also doing that with a practical design lens, which is a bit of a term of art as well. But we can look to our neighbors in the state north of us who are doing a really great job of that. We'll look more into that. I won't get into the weeds on that one here this afternoon. So with that, Megan, appreciate folks just giving me a little bit of time here. I'll turn it back over to you and we can keep moving.
Thank you, Brendan. Well, with that, I will turn it over to April De Leon Galloway, who is our Rose Quarter Public Involvement and Communications Lead at ODOT, who's going to just do a quick walkthrough of our 2020 engagement in the spirit of year of review as we kick off into 2021. Let's see. I'm just got a message that April has lost connection. She's called in. Natalie, I don't know if you can do a quick check to see if we can bring April back on audio.
Yeah, I will see if I can find her.
The last four digits would be 7258.
Oh, I see her. I will go ahead and allow, see if I can bring her into the other room here.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we got you, April. Thank you.
Okay, I think I'm hearing an echo, so my apologies. I'm so sorry. What a day, right? All of these connection issues. So yeah, I was all set to present on screen, but that's okay. So I'll just pretend like I'm in the room with you, and when I say next slide, just assume the slide's going. So I'm April De Leon Galloway, Public Involvement and Communications Lead for the project. I'm just going to run through 2020 engagement with you. We'll talk about what we did, what we heard, and how we move forward in 2021 and beyond. But first, wanted to briefly kind of talk about our approach to engagement at a high level in relation, especially to our value that was collectively adopted by this group around having a community-informed project and transparent decision-making. That means for us in terms of engagement at a high level, we want to minimize barriers to participation for families in the region, especially in a COVID environment. It's particularly hard. I think all of our public agencies have felt it, and you know, how do we meaningfully engage people and build relationships and really understand kind of the community's vision and values, especially with the barriers that many Title VI and environmental justice communities face in just participating in a project like this. So I want to engage in that meaningful two-way dialogue as well through this value and also establish a reliable feedback loop, making sure that the communities that do provide input also hear back from us on how we are using their input to establish a better project. So next slide, please. So on this slide, you're going to see a lot of different kind of tactics that were used for engagement in 2020. We did an online open house in the latter part of 2020, so 2,300 plus participated in that online open house. The idea there was to ensure that the community was adequately informed of the project status, and also collect input from individuals in the community to ensure we understood how they envision the Rose Quarter project area. We did 2 surveys as well, 900 plus respondents. So one was a statistically significant survey conducted in September. Another one was on the online open house. We canvassed 400 plus businesses. These were businesses in and around the project area with a focus on Black-owned businesses. We held 17 committee meetings. This included the work of all 3 committees, the Executive Steering Committee, the Community Advisory Committee, and the Community Oversight Advisory Committee. Most of those meetings occurred during the latter part of 2020. We also conducted community-based organization outreach in the latter part of 2020, especially. We had 5 small group briefings to inform community-based organizations about the project and learn the best ways to reach their communities. We also took a proactive approach to communication. We published 31 press releases and newsletters throughout 2020 and worked to notify the public using media outlets that write specifically for Black audiences as well, and found new ways to reach the community and kind of upped our game through social media as well. Our research shows that Title VI and environmental justice communities of color in particular, use social media more than other media outlets to receive information. So that's something we want to address for 2021 and beyond, is ensure that we are meeting communities where they are through that platform. We hosted discussion groups as well, which you learned about last year. That's both African American discussion groups in late 2019, and then the individuals at Native American Youth and Family Center as well in 2020. So next slide, please. We heard from discussion groups that communities of color need to be at the decision-making tables, and that is part of the impetus for creating the Historic Albina Advisory Board, convening that board, and ensuring that we are in fact hearing. And we heard that in particular from our discussion groups as well as from partners, the Community Advisory Committee, very strongly that we need to have that Black community at the table as well as other communities of color. We also heard the need to realize economic development opportunities, especially as it related to the construction manager, general contractor, our disadvantaged business enterprise and workforce programs. We also heard the desire for restorative justice elements and community cohesion. This refers to space for affordable housing that was actually very popular in the public survey we conducted in September, especially among Black and African American community, and as well as other community uses for the covers like community gathering spaces. It also reflects how the built environment reflects historic Albina as well. So looking toward that as we move the project forward in 2021. Support for climate action and public health was largely supported among Black and African American respondents in the public survey. We heard it a lot as well through general public, through the online open house and other comments we heard as well. Concerns about the mainline improvements in air quality and greenhouse gas emissions were of course part of the conversation, and part of the reason we conducted that peer review was just to ensure that environmental assessment, greenhouse gas emissions and air quality was solid. So next slide, please. We convened the Historic Albina Advisory Board in response to requests to meaningfully involve the Black community in decision making. We brought on board the CMGC, and they are fervently working currently on the diversity plan, which we'll learn more about later this year to help realize those DBE and workforce goals that were set. We also continue intentional engagement strategies, ensuring that we're meeting Title VI and environmental justice communities through trusted channels like community-based organizations that serve them. So we want to have a really robust CBO engagement for 2021. We're developing a matrix of community concerns and ODOT's responses so that we can better hold ourselves accountable. The community can hold ourselves accountable as well. And then also working with partners on the performance measures for the project to ensure we meet our values as we've collectively adopted. And that is all I have, Dr. Holt. I will send it back to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Our next slide. If there are questions and further dialogue that the ESC would like to have, let me encourage you to follow up with Megan. You can follow up with her offline, or if there's something specific in particular that we need to address at the moment, let me open it up to our ESC. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your work on this and your effort to be thorough around thoughtful engagement. We've had a few other executive steering committee members join us, and I'm going to ask you to identify yourself for the sake of the meeting and the recording. Jenna Jarvis. You're still muted.
Just talking away at you, Dr. Holt. Sorry. I'm Jana Jarvis, President and CEO of the Oregon Trucking Association.
Hi, Jana. I'm glad you're here. Glad you're with us. Bryson Davis, you've also joined us.
Yep, this is Bryson Davis. I'm the co-chair of the Williams and Russell Project Working Group. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And then Dr. Ebony Amata.
Hi, I'm here.
Hello.
Ebony Amato with NAMAC, Program Manager. Thank you.
Wonderful. Glad you are here. Our next item on our agenda is an ESC charter review, and it's associated with the independent cover assessment decision. Came out of a facilitator's conversation. And Bryson, I believe that you were going to kind of lead us out in this discussion. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I believe everybody has got a copy of the proposed charter amendments in their email. I'll go ahead and share in my screen and go through it. All right, can everybody see? Okay, so the kind of before we get into some of the details, the concept here is around the independence of the independent cover assessment team, the ICA, and their independence from ODOT, and ODOT again making changes to the scope of work, substantive changes to what the ICA team is doing and what the final product the ICA team presents to the ESC without the knowledge or approval of the ESC. And so for the first, kind of going through this independence concept, the ICA team is going to, under these revisions, the ICA team will make reasonable efforts to maintain their independence. ODOT will make all reasonable efforts to support the ICA team's professional independence. And the ICA team is going to be solely responsible for their products to the Executive Steering Committee. And again, kind of as they've discussed previously, the ESC is the client. Now, components of this that we are looking to add, first is this point number 4, an ESC HAB joint subcommittee will be formed to strengthen the ESC's oversight of the work the ICA is doing. And that this will also better connect the HAB to the work the ICA is doing and better connect the ESC to the hab. And then the HC3, which will continue as a staff committee with representatives from ODOT, Metro, PPS, and TriMet, will continue their coordination and review, and the members of the joint subcommittee will be invited to attend the HC3 meeting. So the subcommittee will be informed of when the meetings occur and will be invited to attend, much like I've been attending for the past month and a half. The ICA team will continue to conduct its work while maintaining this sense of independence, knowing that they've got approved their parameters, and they're not taking direction from ODOT to change the project without our knowledge. And then while ODOT may comment on work, and especially with regards to compliance with contractual requirements, they will avoid commenting on aspects that reflect the ICA's professional judgment. So for instance, commenting that they should have used different parameters, or commenting that they should have taken something else into account. It's more, did they meet their contractual obligations? As ODOT, regardless kind of how we set this up, ODOT still holds the legal contract. So ensuring the ICA's team's independence will require a few additional things. So conversations that are not occurring in public will, if ODOT tells the ICA or suggests the ICA do something or look at something, the ICA will not act on it without the direction of the ESC, the HC3, or the joint subcommittee, depending on what the content of the change is. While ODOT administers the ICA scope of work, any changes or significant clarifications to that scope of work will be presented to the HC3, ESC, or joint subcommittee before implementation. And any substantive changes or clarifications to that scope of work that are proposed by the HC3 members or the ICA team must be approved by the ESC. The joint subcommittee will sort of act in a role where they will determine kind of how to present it and how to bring it up, and then also maybe comment on how those changes will be received and whether or not there's some potential tweaks to those changes that may make it work better for the ESC. But none of these changes will go into effect until they're approved by the ESC. So the ESC has the final say regarding any changes to the scope of work that the ICA is doing. Again, for transparency, HC3 meetings will be open to members of that joint subcommittee. And they'll be getting all the different documents related to it, agendas, notes, presentation content, all of that. So it's not just they only show up and that's all they see. The ICA team will keep the assessment within the scope of work and based on their own independent professional expertise. Again, relying on their skills, their knowledge, not ODOT. The ICA team will have the ability to interact with the technical team in order to collect data or other resources that ODOT has, but ODOT won't be directing the ICA team work kind of aside from that. The ICA team may also use ODOT's community engagement, public meeting support to prevent the ICA team from having to repeat certain things that ODOT already has the resources to provide support on. So the I'll kind of skip down to the joint subcommittee to kind of give some more details on what this entails. So this will be 2 to 3 members of the ESC and 2 to 3 members of the HAB. They will have a regular scheduled meeting with the ICA team each month to discuss, to get updates on what the ICA team is doing, and to discuss anything that came up that may need approval. The ICA team, or this subcommittee, will also be used by the ICA team if there is something urgent that may need to be addressed before the next ESC meeting. And so the ICA team will assemble the subcommittee for an ad hoc meeting to address whatever emergent issue has arisen. Again, as I mentioned before, the subcommittee will be included in all the HC3 agendas, meeting notes, documents, that sort of thing. Now, outside of the joint subcommittee members and the ICA consultant team members, regular participants for these meetings with the joint subcommittee and the ICA will, the only other participants will be Tri-Excellence as facilitators. So ODOT will not be participating in these subcommittee and ICA meetings. So the ICA will be able to have clear communication with the subcommittee. And so the section C kind of reiterates what a lot of us have discussed already about the ICA, HC3, and joint subcommittee's role in the charter and in the process as a whole. So the executive steering committee, the ESC, will direct the ICA in assessing the highway cover design, creating the highway cover design scenarios, and to be recommended to OTC for direction and final approval. ICA team independence, as we discussed earlier, the team is objective and impartial. It will advocate, and they have been advocating for a transparent and inclusive process for their component of the work. And they are not advocating on behalf of any particular stakeholder or for any particular outcome. I mean, really kind of their focus, their goal is to take the parameters that they're given and provide their recommendations based on those parameters and their professional judgment. The HC3 will continue serving as that staff working group. It will review and provide input on different deliverables that will be considered by the ESC as part of the ESC's recommendation to the OTC. The HC3 is also will provide a forum for the discussion of that ICA work progress. So, getting updates on the schedule, the change management, the coordination with other project materials and committees. And it will provide, the HC3 will provide feedback to the ICA team as the project goes along, how information is being communicated, how it's fitting into the overall process, that sort of thing. And then, as I mentioned before, the HC3 will include representatives from ODOT, Metro, TriMet, and PPS. The joint subcommittee members will be able to attend, and then information will also be made available to the city, the county, and Albina Vision Trust. And then, I've already kind of gone through the joint subcommittee and its role. So that's kind of the proposed change to provide a little bit more control over the ICA work, a little bit more oversight, a little bit more direct connection between the the ESC and the HAB on one end and the ICA on the other end, so that we better understand and better track what they're doing at each step. And then various mechanisms and components to ensure that the ICA team isn't overly influenced or overly directed by ODOT in a way that the ESC is not aware of or the ESC doesn't approve of.
Thanks, Bryson, for walking us through that. I appreciate it. Before I open it up to the committee at large to discuss, was there anything that needed to be covered from the ICA team that wasn't identified?
You know, the only clarification that I would make is that the intent is for subcommittee members to be invited to HC3 meetings for the purposes of transparency, but they would not be expected to attend each one. One of the reasons for the creation of the joint subcommittee was so that we didn't have an expectation that ESC members or HAB members, in addition to their membership in those committees, would be expected for another 90-minute meeting every week. So they'd certainly be welcome to attend, as Bryson has been doing, which we appreciate, but just wanted to make that clarification.
Perfect. There's a hand up. Nate McCoy.
Thanks, Stephen Hope. I guess Bryson, and maybe I missed it in the review, but is there an expectation of how often, I guess, the subcommittee will roll up between all the committees to come and report out to the larger group? Because I know, and I appreciate what Nolan just said, that we can attend when needed or when we have the time. But I guess with all that work being done, and some of the folks being involved in, maybe the first part of the ESC originally, I'm just wondering how that all is going to work. Would it be you to be reporting back up to the group, or is it a collection of those 2 or 3 bodies that would report? What does that look like, and how is all that information being transferred across all the committees?
Yeah, so I think when you look at, if we're just talking about a normal workflow, there's nothing kind of extraneous or emergent that arises. The subcommittee has their one monthly 90-minute check-in meeting with the ICA team. And then in each monthly meeting that we have as an ESC, if there is substantive information for the subcommittee to report on, or if there's something a little bit more substantive, like a decision that the ESC needs to make or something the ESC needs to approve, then we'll bring that up in a subcommittee report at the ESC meeting. If there's nothing substantial to report on or to discuss, then obviously there won't really be any content there. On the flip side, if there comes up, there's some sort of emergent issue, something that needs to be addressed, the subcommittee might have one or multiple ad hoc meetings to address those issues, to discuss what to do about those issues. And then, as Nolan mentioned, the participation of the subcommittee members in the HC3 meetings is not mandatory, but is voluntary.
Perfect. Does that help, Nate, or was there a follow-up?
Yeah, no, I think that's good on that point. There was another question from your previous agenda or slides that I had, but I could wait.
Right.
Yeah, I can
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it. Brendan? Still on mute. We can't hear you, sir.
The old double mute. Sorry about that. And I'm going to need you to mute, Dr. Holt, because I'm getting an echo from you. Well, first of all, I just want to, Bryson, thank you for the time and effort that you put into this. Really appreciate it. It's an interesting place for me to be in, as you might imagine, as a person that worked with local stakeholders to create this independent committee, not as an ODOT employee, and then to be on it as an ODOT employee and working towards that independence. So I'm 100% behind all your work. And again, just want to tip my hat of appreciation to you. But colleagues, also, I just wanted to reflect back on and it may have been before you got on, Bryson, just the piece that I went over a little bit earlier about the impetus of the project, the purpose and need, and consistency around that. So maybe I'm just proposing something that might be more of a friendly amendment, and I don't quite know where it might go in there as far as wording, but that we have that incorporated as well, meeting the purpose and need that the legislature had when passing HB 2017 and putting it on the governor's desk for signature.
Thank you, Brendan. We appreciate that. Jana.
Well, thank you. And I apologize for joining the meeting late. I have a carbon rules advisory meeting going on at the same time, so I'm multitasking today. But I guess I would ask a question relative to the statement that Brendan just made. My understanding in the purpose of creating this other committee is to talk about what kind of cover, and I'm hoping that whatever we're doing is going to meet the objectives that are defined in House Bill 2017 in terms of addressing the congestion issue there. Because certainly if I'm going to the store with your credit card, I'm going to buy everything I really want. And so I'm hoping that we stay focused on what the purpose is with this cover, and if there are additional desires out of this committee and what they want to get there, that the funding source for that will not necessarily be coming from the Highway Trust Fund. So that's my concern, and I would appreciate that we would address that in the discussion.
Thank you very much. Feedback, response.
I think maybe just real quick to jump in, Dr. Holt, Jana's point is super important. And I wonder whether or not Brendan or Bryson, you guys can verify this. If folks on the HAB even understand where the inception of the resources came from to pay for this specific project and what that means. But actually, I feel really bad because I just skipped in front of President Peterson because I see a blue hand over here. And so I'm very sorry, Lynn.
Well, I was going to say, so to clarify a little bit on some of these charter points, they don't necessarily impact our assessment of the funding sources or our assessment of the project. It's more the process of the ESC verifying kind of what's going on and being connected to what's going on in a way that we can make informed decisions when it comes to addressing those issues. So none of the changes that are connected to the subcommittee structure and all of that directly impacts that more than it just kind of gives us more direct eyes on the process itself.
I appreciate that, but I definitely love that analogy or metaphor Jana used about the credit card. You can say, hey guys, we're going to the credit card because we're going to go to the store and get some groceries, right? But I think there needs to be a grocery list before folks understand exactly what they're going to the store to get groceries for. Is it for a dinner? Is it for food for a year? Is it for, a Thanksgiving, feast? So I think there should be clarity around that, because once you know exactly what you have and what you can utilize and what you can't utilize, it helps kind of make your mission and your emphasis on what it is you're trying to achieve more concise. So.
Well, and the reason for my statement is, and I apologize if you already had this discussion in this meeting today, but has this been defined, what it is that the cover should, I guess the minimal requirements for the cover and the funding for all of that? And I don't have a clear picture on it, so maybe I'm the only one who doesn't. I don't know.
I'd like to try to answer that briefly. The conditions that we've been given for the highway covers is that it is focused on scenarios for highway covers. So, that's important to keep in context. And then beyond that, we're required to produce one scenario that physically stays within the area of potential impact, and then one which doesn't. As we present that, there will be opportunities for this committee to provide us with feedback about what's working, what's not, what concerns you have, more information you'd like to have. And our requirement will be that we not only provide a conceptual level of the physical concept, but also of things like cost, things like any partnerships that might be necessary to make it happen. It's kind of at a very sketch level, a full package of that concept. Once you've given us that feedback and potentially directed us other things you'd like us to study, a potential third concept, we would then come back another time and you'd be able to then again provide feedback, concerns, and then make a final recommendation or not. So I think that's where there's an intention for you to be able to put some side rails on what's happening. And of course, you can do that throughout this process through this committee. And the intent is, again, as Bryson said, is not that this subcommittee is making those decisions or providing that direction, but it's just that they're making sure that there's an opportunity for members of this committee to keep track of what we're doing, understand if we're changing direction, be able to raise a flag and send it back to this committee if there's a significant concern. And it's a response to the concern that meeting as frequently as this committee does, that there wasn't sort of a robust engagement that allowed the kind of oversight that was originally envisioned.
Then my question is, do we need to define that in the charter? So that I think speaks to the point that Brendan made. So that was my question.
Well, thank you, Janet. Brendan, if you hold for 1 second, I think Lynn wanted to respond, and then we'll go to you. I mean,
no,
President Peterson.
I was just going to say, go to President Peterson.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate all the work that you did on this, Bryson, in trying to articulate how if this is our quote independent oversight, which is the way it was presented to this committee, how we would go about making sure and ensure that it was an independent oversight. And so I appreciate all the work that went into thinking about the details about how to move forward. So thank you. I think the point was to make sure that it was independent, not that it was being micromanaged by this committee. It's independent. And so I kind of feel like we're getting a little ahead of ourselves in the conversation about how to pay for this and how to envision it before we've even had the conversations about what it could be. And so I just want to take a step back and remind us that these processes are iterative, and they're iterative for a reason, because sometimes you don't know what you want until you actually see it, physically talk about it with people, mentally throw it around in your head and say, nope, that's not going to work, or that's too big, or that's too small, or that is not achieving the original intent. To the point about the purpose and need, I don't think we need to reiterate the purpose and need in this charter. It's there, it's the project. But what we do have is a long list of values and goals that we are trying to achieve out of this project that also have performance metrics that will be associated with them, in which we can review and go back to whether it's meeting purpose and need through those statements. So I'm hoping that that's where we're going to be able to review all of the different scenarios. And to the point about financing, just coming back around, again, not getting ahead of ourselves. I think everything is on the table, including more federal money, because federal has never been really a big part of this conversation. And this new administration moving forward with an infrastructure program, hopefully it's a real one and not just another infrastructure week that we have all been through a gazillion times before. But if that truly comes forward, it also sounds like there's a real interest in these types of projects. So I would hesitate to say that we should cap the amount of money that we're talking about and say no more, because we've already had cost overruns with this project and it was only around inflation. So in order to just make sure that we're not getting ahead of ourselves, again, I think we need to give a little space to iterate through these scenarios and really think about what the complexity of the project is, not what it was initially triggered as, which is different in the end on almost every project. The trigger is different than the actual complete solution that is necessary to achieve a full systems perspective. So, and to actually meet community needs. So thank you again, Bryson. I appreciate the work on the resolution. I'll be voting for it. Thanks.
Thank you, President Peterson. Brendan.
Well, Dr. I just want to say thank you, President Peterson. I withdraw my looking for a friendly amendment there around purpose and need. We're lucky ESC members to have someone with the breadth of experience and knowledge that President Peterson has, who I think kind of directed a great course of action here. So I withdraw that kind of request for a friendly amendment around purpose and need. So just for the record there, and thank you, President Peterson.
At this moment, our hope was to ratify this amendment to move forward in it. Are there any other conversations, concerns, discussion related to the charter amendment prior to going to motion or going to accepting the amendment? Any concerns, thoughts, Executive Steering Committee members? I see no hands raised. Well then, my simple question to the Executive Steering Committee is if you are in support of the amendment as worded to be added into the charter, simply say yes. And I'll call you one at a time. Beginning with Bryson Davis.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ebony Amata. Did we lose? No, she's still there. You're on mute, Dr. Mata.
I'm so sorry. I'm having a little technical issues. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
In your position, yes, no? Yes for the amendment?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Nate McCoy.
Yes.
Thank you. Shanna Jarvis.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Brendan Finn.
Yes, and thank you again to Mr. Davis. And I'll just clarify for the record, as an ODOT employee, I will not, but an ESC member, I will not be involved in the process. So just to have that extra layer of clarity.
Thank you. Steve Witter.
Good afternoon. Let me start by thanking Bryson. I just didn't get a chance to do it in the regular dialogue. So with that, my pleasure to vote yes on the amendment.
Very much. I know President Peterson, you already indicated, but I'm going to ask you again. President Peterson.
Yes.
Thank
much
you very much.
appreciated.
And then Vice Chair Simpson.
Chair votes yes.
Wonderful. Amendment added. Thank you for the conversation, the work, and the discussion. We're going to move to our next item on the agenda, which is the Independent Highway Cover Assessment information. And Nolan, I believe I'm giving it to you.
You'll actually be handing it to one of my colleagues. And I can't remember if Charles or Gina is starting off.
I think I'm starting off. Pardon.
Charles is starting off.
Well, thank you so much for giving us this time on the your agenda. We have a few things to go over with you, and I'd like to give you an introduction to what those are in the next 3 minutes, and then give time for Gina and Stephen Lewis to give you a snapshot of what's coming up and planned for work session 1, which happens at the end of February. And so we're making plans for that, and they can explain. We have a break following that. And then we have new information, which is the development assessment framework, which Morgan Amelie from our office will present to you, which is a means by which to evaluate scenarios that we are developing to enable you to be effective with the analysis that we provide you. So with that, the next slide is just a reminder of our role, but I want to thank Bryson for pretty much going through our role and our purpose here and the adoption of the ESC Charter. Essentially, it's just as a reminder, each of these meetings, that what is our role. We are providing the analysis that supports the deliberations of the ESC and making a recommendation to the OTC. And we work with the HC3, who supports us in managing packaging information that's consumable, usable, and supportive of your deliberations. And that's sort of the chain that we work in, and we deeply appreciate that process being available to us. It's been helpful to date, and the amendment improves that. The next slide is just where we are in the process. Once again, we're between the that ominous red dot at the beginning and work session 1. And work session 1 is where we're, as Gina will explain, and not to take any steam out of her presentation, which is fantastic, is finding a way to connect to the community and get the wise advice in an analysis that supports your deliberations. So we are preparing for that. Then following that, we have a work session 2, which is where we'll bring 2 scenarios, as Nolan mentioned prior, for you to analyze using our development assessment framework tool that allows you to do an apples to apples comparison of what those performance of those scenarios are with your values and outcomes in mind. And then finally, between work session 2 and work session 3, we'll be bringing what seems to be the emerging recommendations, begin to surface some of those, give you the ability to sort out in your mind what it is and how those recommendations should be posed for a final delivery on July 15th at the OTC meeting. So that's sort of the larger scope of our work, and we are ready to do this with you. So next slide, I'd like to turn the time over to Gina Woolley, who's our facilitator. We want to welcome her to the project team and her good work. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. So I wanted to just quickly,
you can skip these slides.
Sequence. We need to go down through the charter review. Next. All right, now we're where we need to be. Thank you. So the next slide, please. So I want to talk about, we wanted today give you a sense of where we're going with work session 1, how we're framing it, what we expect to get out of it, and to give you kind of an overview of some of the types of exercises and materials we'll be trying to vet with community stakeholders. I should just say that we're in the middle of our outreach. We've reached out to over 50 organizations. At this point, we're getting good response for people to recommend participants for this. And so we will continue that process and try to solidify our cohort. But we've framed these workshops very much aligned with the sort of the process that Chair Peterson talked about. We are basically trying to make sure that the community has an opportunity to tell us what's most important to them, what types of uses, spaces, and character are most important to them, and that what they tell us will help inform and create this new space on the lids and potentially beyond the lids, not necessarily as part of this project, but long term. And this type of framing will give the community a sense of, it'll give us a sense of what is going to represent restorative justice to the community. Next slide, please. So this is how we're looking to frame our process. So to capture the community's vision in this first workshop, and that will inform our design, programming, and scenarios, and the outcomes that the community feels are important to evaluate in these scenarios. Next slide. So what we hope to get out of this work session is we hope to learn what things are most important in the community. We hope to share ideas and tools for what makes a vibrant neighborhood and potentially provides restorative justice. We want to use examples of precedents, of other precedents, to inform what can happen on and around the highway covers in the Rose Quarter neighborhood. And we also want to prioritize and validate the outcomes that are most important to the community participants to help set the table for achieving restorative justice in the development of the highway covers and the long-term the neighborhood. Next. So what we've done is we've basically we're kind of organizing our presentation of content and how we expect to process the community around some outcomes that have already been identified by ESC and the community as being elements of providing restorative justice for the project in the neighborhood. And those three elements are community wealth, community health, and community cohesion. And we want to give you a little preview of some of the, if you can go to the next slide, we would expect to ask the community participants, the workshop participants, what creates community wealth, what creates community health, and what creates community cohesion. And so we know that these are key objectives of community stakeholders. And what we have is we've identified through all of the review of the record and the previous feedback examples that have come up as elements of community wealth creation, community-owned businesses, affordable housing, food court, cart pods, indoor marketplace, job training resource, childcare. And I'm gonna, Stephen Lewis and myself from our team, Stephen Lewis from our team is going, and I are gonna kind of walk you through some of the images that we have put together that we will be sharing with community participants to show how these different elements can manifest themselves in built environments. So if you'll go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen and he can walk you through some of these precedents quickly.
Thank you, Gina, and good afternoon, everyone. In the interest of time, I'll be fairly high level about this, but when engaging with a group who may have different ideas and interpretations of the same themes, a picture is literally worth 1,000 words. And then with that in mind, we're going to provide precedents. As you see here, as relates to community wealth, the idea of Black-owned businesses. In the top, you see Detroit, an avenue of fashion which has recently been restored, and Black businesses are thriving there now. So there are things we can learn from those type of scenarios. And in the lower, you see a job training that's wrapped around and woven into an affordable housing project. And then, of course, the informal economy of food carts and food trucks. Next slide, please. In addition, the keys to wealth creation are often freeing our residents to have the ability to go to work, which childcare plays a big role in, and to be able to live and provide for a family in an affordable manner with no sacrifice of quality. And so we certainly have many precedents of beautifully done affordable housing projects that are beacons to hold up to the residents and the community stakeholders to know what's possible for them. Next. No,
so we'll be asking a question of what creates community health, and we know that this is a critical aspect of restorative justice to the community, and that these elements, these bullets, are some elements that have been identified as elements that can be incorporated that create community health. So Stephen will walk you through some of the precedents we put together for to share with participants around this.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Right. So again, we're just previewing a snapshot of a few of the images we plan to enhance and have more examples, but obviously access to nature, community gardening, even small farming enterprises, which we know are working very well in some other places, and the outdoor recreation that signifies a welcome and an ability to have a cultural signature that lets people feel as though they are very welcome and are as equal to anyone to traverse that place and to play in it, etc. Next. And again, the idea of bringing healthy food into the neighborhood, incorporating that with Black-owned business, and then to have places where our youth can go for education, recreation, after school. And again, this project on the right is woven into an affordable housing project here in Los Angeles, where I am, a very successful project done in a historic YMCA that was in the heart of the Black community and then ran into disrepair, but was then resurrected and turned into this beautiful project. Next.
And then the third element is community cohesion. So we know that that I-5 and urban renewal projects have damaged social networks for the Black community, have severed a sense of ownership and place and community cohesion. And so these, some of these elements, we'll be asking participants which of these elements they value the most and what else they would value on the covers and in the Rose Garden neighborhood.
So establishing an identity of the place, of the people, is critical. However modest the improvements, if they signify, I belong here, this is mine, it goes a great distance toward social cohesion, community cohesion. And on the left, we see a beautiful installation by Black artist Charles McGee in Detroit in front of the African American Museum that now stands in perfect view for the public to understand the importance of culture in the bigger public discussion. Below in the center is the new Destination Crenshaw, which is an incredible project. If you're not aware of it, hopefully you'll know about it soon. It's taking the entire corridor that was the epicenter of Black culture and commerce in Los Angeles and restoring it with putting art and programming, public programming at the center of it. And on the left, a wonderful signage program in Birmingham, Alabama to celebrate the civil rights history. And these signs are deployed throughout the historic core of Birmingham, Alabama. So the opportunity to signify identity in everything that we do is probably, something we want to talk greatly with the stakeholders about.
Thanks. Next slide, please. And these are, go ahead, Stephen.
No, you got it.
These are, when we shared this with HC3, Rose reminded us that Metro is doing some of these placemaking types grants around the city that are, to establish cultural identity, like the community artists, residents, and the youth and cultural opportunities. And we just wanted to showcase those smaller placemaking grants that are actually happening in our own community. So, in work session 1, these are what we really want to get out of it. The feedback we really want is we want to know what types of spaces, places, and features would the community like to see included in a neighborhood that they would feel a sense of belonging in, and what would create, which of these could be created on the highway covers that would once again provide a sense of place and belonging. We want to understand what types of spaces, places, and features do they think would best provide restorative justice to the Black community and others displaced. And we want to identify the outcomes that the community thinks will provide that restorative justice, will help measure that restorative justice on the proposed highway covers, both short and long term. So this is a run through of kind of how we're proposing to structure the work session. And it's our first run through, and what I should also say to all of you is this is not our full workshop presentation. We've just started developing the approach and just reframed, completely rethought how we want to present materials and solicit feedback from the community stakeholders. And so what you're seeing today here is the beginning, the major elements, the focus, and kind of the first preliminary run through or format for the session. So this, you would have to, this is the beginning of the session. We're expecting these to be 2.5 hours. And then you go to the next page, please. And this is the rest of that work session and how it would be. So we'll be providing a presentation and context in a whole group format, and then we'll be breaking the groups out into smaller groups and letting them process around these questions and have a series of exercises to help solicit the kind of feedback that I mentioned we hope to come out of the process with. So finally, what we want to ask of you today is 3 things. Do you agree with the framing and the goals that we have identified for work session 1? Are there other specific images and precedents that have previously been discussed that you believe are absent from what we've presented and should be highlighted in the community workshops? And is there anything else you'd like to see us accomplish in work session 1 that we haven't indicated that we expect to get out of work session 1?
Thanks, Gina. I appreciate it. Thanks, ICA team. Appreciate the high-level overviews. Executive Steering Committee, who would like to respond and interact? Comments? Do you agree with the framing? You see the questions. I won't restate them. ESC members. Brendan.
No, President Peterson has her hand raised, and so does Steve.
I'm not seeing the hand raised features. Wow, I apologize. So we'll go with you, President Peterson, and then Steve.
Thank you both for the presentation. I guess, I mean, I really like the idea of kind of wealth and health, and I forgot the third one already. Sorry.
Cohesion.
Cohesion, thank you. Okay, so maybe that's how this all fits in, but I think the 2 things that I've heard over time are connectivity and vitality, right? So how do you not create a dead space? A lot of interchanges, whether they're well, let's just say the vast majority of interchanges create a very kind of unhealthy dead space in terms of economic and physical vitality that makes you even want to be in that space. They're also very unsafe for pedestrians, bikes, transit, even the vehicles moving through them because of the complexity of interchanges. So is that where you're thinking you'd get at those 2 things as in cohesion, or because they're very much related to connectivity, both culturally, physically, right? So I'll leave that to you.
And there also, I think we get at them in terms of health, I mean, and safety. Once we understand what the vision is, I think then we start talking about how those elements actually get fit together into different design scenarios. You have to have a place activated so it doesn't end up being the kind of place you're talking about. It needs activity, it needs vitality, it needs to be activated, and it needs to be safe. It connects, but it has to be a place where people can pass through, because it's at a nexus of a lot of activity, of multimodal activity. So what we're hoping to do right here is really just to think about what are the elements, what are all the puzzle pieces that we have to play with, and then to take those back once we understand what's most important to community members, and start thinking about how they fit into design, how they come together to form different scenarios.
Just a quick follow-up. Then in the imagery, I guess, obviously this is not the entire slide deck.
Yeah.
I guess I would like to be able to test out the continuum of things that we've heard over the years working with Albina Vision. You know, from something small in terms, I think the community center was one of the pictures, to something larger and everything in between, right? So in terms of the built environment, I don't think we're testing out that in images from what I saw, but if you have it, great, awesome. But I think we do need to test out those visuals and get people's reaction to them, whether they're practical or not at this point. We need to figure out what people are leaning towards and what they see as, I mean, what they relate to in terms of health, wealth, and cohesion.
Good, that's great feedback, thank you.
Thanks, President, appreciate that. Steve,
Well, this is really exciting to be a part of, and so I just want to thank everyone for all their work that they've put into this. I really just want to maybe play off what President Peterson said about the kind of place we're making here and where is this place. And I've kind of been toggling back and forth between the presentation and looking at a site map. And I've design professional myself, so that comes with all sorts of warts, but just as much as important as the centers of these kinds of places are the edges. And so I noticed that in a lot of the imagery, there were very active storefronts and very active edges to these public spaces. And so I know that wealth creation is a big part of what we're all trying to see here. And one of the things that has been a curiosity of mine is how the project deals with staging areas, and is the project purchasing property, and can those property purchases be, I mean, again, I'm new, I'm asking all sorts of questions that are probably dangerous, but can those things start to work together with this LID highway covers project so that we can try to, you know, as Nolan would say, get a 3-4 out of it, and try to really make the most out of what we can do. I think President Peterson said it really well, where these places are located, they're in just difficult spots. And so I think what we're connecting with this cover is just as important as the cover itself. So thank you.
So Steve, I think you're on our wavelength. You know, we are thinking about, you know, those pieces long-term and how they fit into the vision, you know, so that the vision goes beyond potentially the LID, not in the short term, but in the long term. And that some of the other things that don't necessarily fit on the crossovers potentially can be accommodated in terms of the development of those other pieces of property that ODOT will ultimately own, and it will, once the project is complete, will not have a use for. So I think that is part of our thinking about what goes into one of those scenarios, for sure.
Thank you very much. Nate, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I want to pretty much echo what Steve and Chair or President Peterson said. I think one other thing that could add value, and maybe this is kind of what President Peterson said, but I remember us doing some design charrettes, at least with the Housing Bureau, around like what accommodations you could have, whether it be commercial spaces. So are we talking about, you know, 10 storefront spaces on the ground floor? Are we talking about 30? You know, are we talking about 100 units of affordable housing? Are we talking about 400? You know, I mean, and again, just trying to see if there's any accommodations of scale, capacity on that one site. I would agree with Steve on the connectivity, because I feel like you're not going to get everything on one site, but maybe there's other joint sites that can be somehow weaving into this whole narrative around, it isn't really just about the cap. It's about, you know, having this community center over here and housing over there and a commercial space over here. And again, I don't know what that looks like because we're spending a lot of time on just the cap. But to get to my real question, which to me is the only important question in my mind, borrowing from MLK Day last week, is what the heck do we mean about wealth creation? You know, to me, it's not owning a storefront on a you know, a 700 square foot unit and owning a storefront. It's about who's owning the building. And I didn't hear any conversation about what that looks like. And Gina, you more than anybody knows that that question has never been answered in our community. And we've had many of these design charrettes, but yet I've never heard any real answers or any real culmination of what does it mean to have a community and ownership of not just one project, but multiple projects in the community. And I'm wondering, is that going to be a part of the conversation? Because if we're talking about wealth creation, you know, I don't know what that means. So can we get more explanation on that? Because to me, it just sounds like an abstract thing right now.
Nate, the hope is that the explanation comes from you and that we're really receiving that information rather than telling somebody. And so whether it's the ESC, the HAB, community members that come to our workshops, we want them to tell us what wealth creation means to them. And then, you know, the credit card analogy at the grocery store comes back in. We won't be able to put everything on it, but once we understand what the priorities are, that will help to inform what the scenarios look like.
One quick follow-up on that, Nolan. One quick follow-up. Yeah. And I'm just teasing this out. If you were a community person who knew nothing about wealth creation, nothing about development and how that works, which are many in our community, how are you going to do that? Because I don't even think people know what they don't know. So how are they going to actually get informed through this process? They don't really even know where they're starting.
Well, it won't, the wealth creation, that larger idea that you're talking about, I think comes at later in our process when we talk about the governance and the partnerships and, you know, to really create the vision, you're going to need more than, you know, just the different elements. You're going to need to talk about really, if you're recreating a community, you need to talk about what are the other kinds of partnerships that need to be in place? What are the other resources that need to be in place? So I think that ultimately we see what we're providing you as being a set of recommendations around all of those things to get there. And so I know that everybody's impatient to get there instantly. We're gonna take the community through a process, and then we'll come back with you know, how that you make that more comprehensive and that it goes deeper and broader than just a person owning a 900 square foot building, and how you actually vest whatever you're talking about, proposing about doing, how you vest it in so that the community has some self-determination related to the ultimate, you know, revitalization of this area and the reclamation of this area.
Thank you very much, Bryson. I see your hand. Great comments.
Yeah, and to further to Nate's point about wealth creation, you know, the Williams and Russell project has been looking at various different structures and development ideas and development components that could address that very question. And one thing I hope that we have by the time we get to that determination with this group is we've got even more data and consideration that we can share from our project into this project, so we can say, oh, this idea for this component of the project will really help with that wealth creation piece, because there's several new and creative ideas that have come up in the past few years on how you take developments and create wealth from land developments that I think we'll be able to draw from.
Excellent conversation, everyone. And I appreciate the feedback and the input. And the great thing about this is an ongoing dialogue. This is the work of the Executive Steering Committee. These are the things we're going to engage in and process. And Steve Witter, let me just add, what you articulated, I don't think is creating any issues or problems. I think that's the work that you bring into the space, is what are the other ways? What are the other thinking outside the bounds or potential historic parameters, and how do we expand around those? Guys, we are at 12 minutes to 5. At this point, I think we're in a good momentum. We are not going to do a break. We're just going to roll into the next section so that we can end within a timely manner. Significant stuff that we've done today, and I appreciate it. So we're going to skip right past that 5-minute break, and hopefully everybody's in agreement with that. If not, call me later and we'll talk about it. So right back to the ICA team.
So Morgan is
Hi.
Go ahead, Morgan.
Oh, so sorry. Hi. I'll be as quick as I can. I'm going to talk about the development assessment framework. Next slide. And the purpose of that framework is to evaluate how well development scenarios serve community goals. And I'll define development scenarios because we use that term a lot, and it's a design and a governance structure. So that's the term we use to describe the whole product of what the ICA provides for your review. We want to provide the information that you need to make informed decisions. So this is where we'll put those performance metrics. Is it 100 affordable housing units or 400, to use the example Nate used? And we want a clear way for the community to meaningfully provide input. Next slide. And just briefly, what we hear and collect into the development assessment framework will also inform design. For example, this is another project we worked on. And when the community said it was important to have more events in that neighborhood, next slide, that translated into a stage, a physical change in the design to meet that community need. So our scope in this project is a larger area. It's tackling large goals like air quality and wealth creation, but in the same way, the outcomes we hear will inform our designs and inform how we measure their success. Next slide. To create the first draft of the development assessment framework, we organized a lot of outcomes that we had heard, primarily beginning with the values and outcomes that the ESC provided. And then there are some things that we were supposed to assess in our contract. We did a big record review of community comment, and we organized all of the outcomes that the community had mentioned would be good for the neighborhood and good for the project to achieve. We organized those under themes, and then our team will look for opportunities to achieve those outcomes. And then finally measure how well a development scenario achieves them. Next slide. And I want to make sure to put this in context that the development assessment framework is what the ICA team will fill out with objective information about a development scenario and subjective determinations about how well a development scenario serves the community, or if some of those elements in a development scenario are more important than others. That can be recorded in a decision table, a separate thing we provide, and you fill that out. And we'll go to the next slide. At this point, the development assessment framework, this is its level of development so far. It's organized under the ESC values, and then underneath each one of those, there are the outcomes that you wrote. And then we also added outcomes that we'd heard from other sources into the same themes. And then finally, we'll add how we're going to measure those. And we don't have metrics proposed for your review yet. Right now, this is just a first draft list. And you'll see at the far right-hand side, there's a question mark because we identified some outcomes that didn't seem like they quite fit into one of these themes. But I'll get to that in just a moment, because on the next slide, I want to talk about how we're developing outcomes. And I think you'll see an outcome that says improve air quality. And I wanted to note that most outcomes are a combination of a lot of different sources saying, and when they said something pretty similar, they were combined. So a lot of different sources have said that air quality is important. Clearly, improving air quality needs to be one of the things that we measure. And each source has had a different take. So that gives us some clues as to what we might measure. The ESC talked about air quality within the API, and then at Harriet Tubman Middle School in particular. In the contract, it looked at emissions. In the record review, they talked about other key sites, and we might hear more things from the work sessions. So that is how we're putting that together. We'll go to the next slide. And this shows some potential ideas for a couple other themes. And we had a couple, I'll just give you a quick example. There was one note to assess the urban design strengths of a development scenario, and another outcome that was similar to meet the goals of city plans for this area. And that didn't quite fit into the original categories. And also there was another note to measure the relative value of real estate. And that's kind of a general note. It's not specific to wealth creation for the Black community, which is the context that wealth creation was written in the ESC values and outcomes. And so we didn't want just kind of a general assessment of the value of real estate to water down that outcome's intent. So this is an idea that we're presenting to you. And I think I want to note that this is just extra information in these additional categories. And we think it makes sense to categorize them separately to keep them distinct, since they didn't quite fit. And then also note that you can decide how much information in these categories means to you. Next slide. So finally, we've got a large list of community outcomes, and they're all organized into the first draft of the development assessment spreadsheet. We provided you the whole thing with no further editing other than combining when people had said the same thing. And one of the early pieces of feedback that we heard is that it could stand to be refined to make it more useful. We wanted you to see the full list first, and we have some ideas about how we can refine it down. I'll hit just a couple. I think we looked at the idea that we could just reduce as much as possible while ensuring that we can still review a development scenario holistically. And differentiate. We want to take a really close look at these and see which ones we think will really help you differentiate between different development scenarios. For example, one of the outcomes is that connecting Albina to different areas of Black displacement in the city is important. And that makes total sense. It is important. And however, the different ways we might develop this project are not likely to make a big difference in that. So maybe measuring that isn't information that'll help you make decisions. Maybe do some further combining, and then we want to organize this in a way that is as clear as possible. So it's something that the community and you can both help create and then use. And with that, I'll skip to the next slide. We just have 3 questions for you, although we're interested in any feedback you have. We want to know if we're being objective and transparent enough about how we've incorporated community input so far, if you see any improvements that could make this a more useful tool, and if you have any initial ideas, having seen the outcomes that are listed right now, what you think is most important to measure and achieve.
Thank you very much. If you could go to the gallery view, please. Hands raised, comments from the executive steering committee. Thanks, Morgan, for going on that. I see no hands. Nolan, any further comment? Gina, further comment, information? So next kind of section.
So real quick, Dr. Holt, I'm curious if Morgan was asking about those other 2 categories, if those were going to be things that just a point of clarification, were those going to be things that the group was going to add, or was she looking for feedback on those areas being added?
Morgan, to clarify?
Yeah, I'm very interested in feedback on if you think that makes sense.
If I may say, one thing that we wanted to be very respectful of, respecting the categories and themes of the values of the ESC. And we were wanting to add other columns, if you will, or other means to evaluate scenarios, such as restorative justice, for example, might actually break down into 2 or 3 columns underneath restorative justice just to get at, wealth creation in a more succinct way, like to measure it and see it and hold it a little bit more carefully than having it rolled up under restorative justice. So that's one of the things that we're sort of teasing right now, is trying to give it a little bit more fidelity on the detail, if that makes sense. Because some of the themes in columns seem to be wrapping up a ton of good outcomes, but they don't give us the means to administer to it in a design or talk about it with the community, more specifically. And I guess we're kind of asking for permission to give that a shot, use our experience to kind of break it up a bit. And so that's kind of the context for what we're doing. We're kind of being a little tentative, but we're also giving you the reason for the tentative nature and then giving you a sense for what we'd like to do.
And we pull back up that slide that had those last 2 categories that are outside of the ESC's charter, just real fast. Thanks, Amber.
And Morgan, I don't think you have categories listed yet.
It was a chart.
Yeah,
it just had
Just 2 slides earlier.
Yeah, that one right there. And so obviously urban design could fall into kind of the conversation that the presentation Gina was just leading earlier, but then also cost benefit. I'm very curious about that because I have to always base everything on economics because we live in a capitalistic society and it's just the easiest thing to measure, right? It's a metric. And so is the cost benefit really a category to kind of look into ROI, or is it justifiably to just see whether or not if you can design something and the public spends a bunch of money for all these things and that's the benefit? How granular of detail do you think that that's going to require in order to justify or show a genuine cost benefit? And then I guess at the end of the day, you have to also identify who is supposed to be the beneficiary. And then how do you measure that, right? Or beneficiaries.
Chair Simpson, that's a great question. And actually, that's partly why we have that category, is that some of the economic outcomes that we were finding in our project review or that we were asked to study in the contract didn't necessarily fall under restorative justice. And so that's why we basically created this column to give them another home. Because if we're maximizing real estate value per se, that may be something that's worth measuring, or frankly, if we're monitoring the cost of construction, that may be worth measuring, but measuring it in a separate column than restorative justice, since we don't want to make it seem like, doing those things is restorative justice, or that they are in competition with other outcomes within restorative justice. And this is a little bit ahead, but this is the information we'll be giving to you to inform your ranking and evaluation of scenarios. Once we do that, you will have the opportunity to put weights as individuals and as a group on various outcomes and on various columns here. So if you look at the things in cost benefit and you say, well, those aren't my highest priority, the things over here in restorative justice are, you'll have an opportunity to weight those accordingly, so that whichever, if you don't think these are all equal, they don't have to be counted equal in terms of how they balance up.
I get it. And I appreciate that, Nolan. And just to also, now what made me think of that, now that you're talking broader in terms of like development concepts, there is a justifiable cost benefit as it pertains to what Steve had brought up earlier, pertaining to right-of-way acquisition or additional real estate opportunities, which essentially have already been accounted for and budgeted for, I would assume, which could be clarified by staff. And then there's a different scenario, which is, hey, let's do all these things on this cap, but this is going to be the additional cost in order to be able to get all those things, right? So obviously you can compare it from an analysis in terms of the cost per square foot of the dirt that's already being accounted for versus the dirt that still would have to be acquired or manufactured essentially.
President Peterson.
I just wanted to identify the fact that there might be, it just made me think about it as we were talking about costs benefit. There's going to be qualitative and quantitative measures that come out of this. And I think it's important to recognize both, because there are things that we can cost out, and there are things that we know from lived experience, from our observations, that just needs to be noted as we go through of what the cost and the benefits might be as well.
Thank you very much. Dr. Amato, can I notice your hand?
I didn't have I'm sorry, my hand wasn't up.
Okay. Am I missing anyone? Apologize, my features are just... Technology is great when it works. Any other comments, thoughts? Got time to talk this through.
So Steve, there is one comment. I appreciate the presentation by the group today. I think that, it seems like the community engagement is going to be off to a great start. The one thing at the top of my mind that, I feel like seems to be a drum that's not getting answered from my perspective, but which goes very well with this conversation around community engagement, is what Megan presented earlier. And I'm still troubled by the fact that we are not seeing any information around the CMGC team and what the workforce goals look like, what the contracting goals look like, and from their vantage point, how we achieve this ambitious project and make sure that it's centered around the community that informs the work that this group is doing around community engagement. And so I know there's an evaluation of how many workforce hours are being created, what potential DBE goals might be used. And from what I heard from the team is that they've already got a potential product that they would love to share, but doesn't seem like it's being shared, and time is of the essence. So I'm just wondering from the ODOT staff, when does our group get a chance to really dive deeper? I mean, I love that we're talking about the caps, that is very important, but there's a whole body of a whole other piece of work that we're not spending any time with. And so I'm just wondering, how do we balance that? Because there is a lot at stake, as we all know, on this. And I just want to make sure that we're centering some of these other economic concerns that aren't just living on the cap. So I'm just trying to figure out, how does that fold into this? Because again, it feels like we're losing a lot of momentum and a lot of time. And I still have no idea, why we're not seeing information around how we're going to capture economic development right now. And get people ready for jobs right now. So just wondering if there's any update on that.
Dr. Holt, I am happy to provide a response there. And Nate, we can I'll follow up as well if needed, but you're asking the right question at the right time. So with CMGC being on board, one of the first things that they're focused on is putting together the diversity and subcontracting plan that lays out the details of what you've kind of asked and articulated. And so they're going to be working directly first with the COAC, the Community Oversight Advisory Committee, in developing that diversity plan, so that when that plan comes to you as the executive steering committee, you're seeing it with the COAC's recommendations, really the community's recommendations as part of that. And so that work is kicking off at the COAC's next meeting in February, to then be bringing to the ESC in springtime.
Would it be okay, Megan, for us to see, I guess, that plan at the same time as the COAC? Because I'm only speaking for myself. I feel like I'm an expert in many of those things, and I don't feel like I should have to wait, or others on the ESC should have to wait for another group to look at it and then come up with recommendations and then bring it to us. It almost seems like it should be simultaneous, but unless there's something I'm missing, is there a reason why we couldn't get it at the same time as the COAC?
Yeah, I think there's a way that we could definitely be sharing the information so that you aren't necessarily waiting. We do want to make sure, however, that the COAC does get a bit of a first bite at the apple, so that when you hear the presentation at the full ESC level, you're hearing it with that community recommendation in mind. But yeah, we can definitely find a way to share that in advance.
All right, thank you, Megan.
Comments, other voices, Executive Steering Committee. Any thoughts? Bryson, any thoughts?
No additional thoughts. I mean, I also kind of had the advantage of sort of having this discussion in HC3 meeting too. So it's a little redundant for me.
Appreciate it. Steve, Witter, any comments or thoughts?
President Peterson had her hand up, so I'll defer there.
We're on to general comments. Is that correct? I just want to make sure that I'm not. Okay. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. I guess I had two quick things that I just wanted to check in on, and then I guess I just wanted to raise up the ask for the folks that made the request for the design on the main line for the different, I guess that's where I'll start, is the Joe Courtwright, Aaron Brown request for the width of what the width is. And I know that we're very early in the stages. So to say that there is a design and a width when we're only at, what are we?
30%.
Yeah, no, we're at 15, aren't we? We're not even at 30 yet.
No, you're right. That isn't
20%.
Thank you. We're in between 15 and 30. Thank you. But we're certainly not at 30%. So I think, I guess, just for being able to respond, I'm hoping that we can say, here's what it is today. Here's the minimum and the maximum in terms of what we are looking at, because there's still a lot of wiggle room, especially if you're going through a practical design conversation as we move along this journey. So I'm just hoping we can respond to that. That was my first thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have provided responses to that. And I would say that the environmental document in the project description also includes an image that compares, just as you mentioned, President Peterson, sort of the existing right-of-way and then the anticipated right-of-way, knowing again that the environmental design is at about that 10 to 20% design level, with more refinement and practical design solutions to come.
Okay. So I think what I heard was not the right of way width, but maybe that's part of I heard the width of the highway, but maybe that's what they meant. But I was thinking more the cross section of the highway itself in terms of the number, because they were alluding to the number of lanes versus what we know is still 2 through lanes, auxiliary lane and shoulder. So I was thinking more the cross section. So let's clarify that with them, but I'd be also interested in that just from that perspective. So thank you.
Yeah.
So the two questions that I had, or one was a comment, I guess, and one is more of a question. As we go through this conversation, we're already running into where do we sit in terms of the finance assumptions? And I guess I would just like to ask, I don't want to have a conversation now of how do we be fully transparent about the finance conversation, and what are the pots of money that we could potentially go for, whether that's federal or other, because there might be public-private conversations that come up during this as well. So I guess just in the grand scheme of things, the getting an idea of now about an overview of the finance methodologies that we could look at that will get whittled down as we work towards an actual design and it becomes clearer. But I think it's very unclear, and I think people are filling in gaps right now in trying to figure out how to pay for it and who should pay for it. And I think that's causing quite a bit of consternation, honestly, in the community, as well as Metro itself and the region, as well as in the state. And so I guess I would just like to have get the full breadth out there and make it very transparent about what people are thinking about in terms of the project, in terms of internal ODOT, because I don't want to not sound like a partner, but we were on one course, right, with a transportation package that did not pass muster with the voters, and we will go at it again. But there was $65 million inside that package for the surface streets to connect to this, so that it actually worked for the rest of the region to use the surface streets as well as I-5. And that is a match. That is parcel of the future of this interchange in order for it to work well. So just from my standpoint, how does that actually work into this? And then how does it work if there's actually an infrastructure package that's passed at the federal level? So that's my request, is that we get that on the schedule as soon as possible and get that the first thoughts, knowing that they're first draft thoughts, out on the table, so that's not this unclear as it has been, I guess, as we go forward. So thank you for listening to me, and my need to just kind of, sometimes I feel like an engineer, sometimes I feel like a planner, sometimes I'm gonna be more linear, but right now I need a little bit more information on what internally you guys are thinking about. And then I think related to that is, what role does congestion pricing play in this? And when does the ESC actually get a presentation on the congestion pricing project? Because that is part and parcel of the I-5 bridge, as well as the potential for this project, as well as for a myriad of other things that this region is in need of. So in order to understand where that is and how it affects this project, and how it's basically tied to the hip at I-5, if that is the case with financial projections, then how does that all start to work together? So that's my request on moving forward in the next ESC meeting.
Thanks, President Peterson. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone wanted to respond. Brendan, Megan, if you wanted to respond at all.
That's all really good and helpful feedback. So we'll get to work, President Peterson.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Yeah, just echo that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
I was going to say we had a meeting, commission meeting last week, which Brendan and the team provided an update in terms from the Urban Mobility Office on that exact topic of just regional financing, because this is more of a system-wide issue we're all talking about here, as everybody who's a transportation expert realizes. So obviously that's the big elephant in the room, is how do we pay for all these things? Because it's not just I-5. We have a plethora of challenges around the entire region from a transportation and congestion standpoint. I'm sure Jana knows a lot about that. But I think maybe, sorry to just throw that out there, but Brendan, I don't know, maybe that is something that the ESC group could see. I know there's that one chart that we have that has the green, the purple, and the orange. That's obviously a really important document for these conversations as it ties to financing.
Mr. Chair, you took the words right out of my mouth, and not to have our facilitators think we're going to add a bunch of time on. We can do it in a very decent clip as far as getting ESC updated, and we very much would, as how this project fits into the bigger plan for the region for reducing congestion, managing congestion through the region, and how congestion pricing and the toll program plays a vital role in that, and the timing of that as it relates to this project and where it currently is. So yes, President Peterson, and also the finance issue was a good catch there. I know we talked about a little bit today about how we figure out what the it is, and I know that's what the independent cover assessment has been doing. I haven't been involved in those meetings of late, just to keep that independent piece there. So, but yes, very good points, President Peterson. We will respond to those and make sure they're on our next agenda.
Great conversation. and I appreciate the content and the contributions. So necessary for us to have some moments to dialogue. Any other items from the Executive Steering Committee? All right, we are at 18 after 5. Oh, we do have a hand, Steve? Yes.
I just wanted to say, I'm glad I let President Peterson go before me, because I just want to say what she said. And I absolutely agree. I've heard Chair Simpson say it. I've heard Nate say it. And from my own experience in these groups, at some point we got to talk about brass tacks and how we actually are going to pay for this. And what I worry, and I won't say it was part of my experience at the Southwest Corridor project, but sometimes that steering committee that we participated on didn't want to grapple with some of those tough financial issues early enough. And I think if we can make that transparent, it'll give all of us the best chances at meeting community expectations. So just maybe we'll hold with that. Thank you. I appreciate being here today.
Thank you. All right, I see no hands. Does anyone else see a hand? Okay, no hands. Thanks, Executive Steering Committee, for the work today. Appreciate your time and your energy. Let's talk about what our next steps look like. We will be meeting again in 4 weeks. Part of the thing that we amended today was identifying a couple of members who would like to participate in this subcommittee. And so let me offer it now. If there are any executive steering committee members who would like to be a part of this newly formed or newly forming subcommittee, it would be a extra meeting, 1 meeting a month, another 90 minutes to discuss and keep things moving and assist the ICA in their independent status. So anyone who would like to participate.
I wouldn't mind staying on effectively and being one of the people on the subcommittee.
Excellent. Jana, did I see you?
No, you didn't. I was just asking, this is related to the cover design, correct? Or the aspects of the cover? No.
Yes.
I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Oh, I saw your hand and I got all excited.
And Dr. Holt, again, for the record, as an ODOT employee, even though I'm a member of the ESC, I will not be involved in that subcommittee, as I stated earlier.
Excellent. Well, we've got one.
Furthermore, Dr. Holt, I guess if nobody volunteers today, there are other members that are not present on this call, correct? So
there are
an opportunity to reach out to solicit and see if anybody has interest or time capacity, I guess you can say.
Well, I did see President Peterson unmuted herself and her hand was waved. So.
Correct. I will volunteer, but I would rather other folk be part of this. I will be a backup and an alternative.
You'll be an alternate?
I would love to leave space for other people if they want to do it. However, I will step up if you need me to.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So she volunteered to be an alternate, but an alternate that will take first place if needed. Wonderful.
And I think we said 2 or 3.
We said 2 to 3.
So if both President Peterson and myself are on the subcommittee and somebody else wants to join who's not
Well,
here.
Steve has his hand up. Steve Witter has his hand up. So hi, Steve.
Hi, Dr. Holt. First, let me say, I just felt like it was important that community members, as opposed to agency personnel, maybe have first crack at this. I just think it's tough, when I'm a partner with ODOT at a table or I'm a partner with Metro at a table, because it's independence. I think that that's important, but I would throw my hat in the ring also if there isn't another community member that would rather have that and that's more meaningful. So I'd throw my name in there.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. I will be following up with our executive steering committee members and in our one-on-ones also follow up on this conversation. But Jana, you unmuted yourself, so hi.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm happy to help where I can, but you caught me at the wrong time of the year, unfortunately, with the legislature going into session. So it's harder to volunteer right now.
Understood. Appreciate that. Any other? All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time today. Great presentations, great conversation, input, and feedback. Our next meeting will be the 4th Monday of February. So before we know it, we'll be back together again. The HAB, and we invite you into the HAB and to participate in the HAB. The HAB will be meeting next Monday. Is that correct?
Next Tuesday.
Next
on the 2nd.
Tuesday. On the 2nd. Thank you. The HAB will be gathering. Any closing comments from Erica? Did I cover everything? Is there anything that I missed?
Indeed, I just want to make all of you aware again. I'll be reaching out to make sure that we have a recurring one-on-one scheduled with Dr. Holt in an attempt just to be more efficient as we're discussing all of the items that we need to cover in the Executive Steering Committee minute. So be looking for an email from me if we have not previously scheduled our one-on-ones.
And our goal is to make those recurring so that we have them set and we know that every month we'll be together to prepare this work. I appreciate your time, everyone. Have an excellent and safe rest of the day and week. Please stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.